Welcome to the first inaugural episode of You're on Mute, the BVCFA podcast. A special shout out to Renee Clark, who is the winner of the Name That Podcast contest and came up with this catchy name. Speaking of names, my name is Dara McKay, and I'm the current VP Communications and Engagement for your BVCFA. And I will be your host for as long as you'll have me. Let me just take a moment before we begin just to thank you for listening and to thank you for this incredible opportunity to share. I hope this podcast turns into a great conversation between faculty members and helps us to feel a bit more togetherness than we have in the past year. Well, let's get right into it. We have some great content for you today. The first segment is called What's Up in the FA, where I'll share some developments and important items that your FA is working on right now so we can keep you in the loop. In our second segment, News and Notes, I'll highlight some important news that affects faculty at BVC right now, and then I'll give you my notes on the topic. And last but not least, and my favorite, and you're gonna wanna wait for this one, is segment number 3, From the Faculty, where we'll hear from 2 faculty members about some interesting topics that you will definitely want to listen to. Segment 1, What's Up in the FA? So, just what has been happening in these past months? Well, we have so much on the go behind the scenes, and it's actually awesome. Here's a sample of what we're up to in the Faculty Association today. All right, this just in. New website is a coming. We're so excited about this one. Watch for communications regarding this website. So you, as a faculty, have voted for Creative Elements to build our new site. This site is going to be such a huge asset to us, to you, and to the BVCFA. What the goal of this site is to create a space that's much more functional, much more dynamic, much more interactive than what we currently have, because we have a growing set of needs as a faculty, and it's really going to help us take care of those things. The big thing that I'm most excited about on the new website is going to be the members only area, where only faculty members are able to access it. And if we ever need to communicate with you outside of the traditional methods, or if you have other things that we want to have conversations about, that's going to be a wonderful place for us to come together. So watch out for that. We've currently said yes to the contract on Creative Elements, and we're just moving forward with them having to build that site. Second up, you have elected me, and we've appointed a couple of new members. So first of all, of course, a couple months ago, we had a by-election for the VP of Communications and Engagement, and I want to thank you so much for your votes and your confidence on that, and I really hope that I do this role justice. I love it so far. We also decided to appoint 2 members at large. So the executive got together, and we had a look at 2 particular members who got a good amount of votes for the VP Communications and Engagement race. And we decided we would like to appoint them as members at large. So that's Alex May and Christy Petipa. And so those 2 are going to be having a hand in different faculty association initiatives, and you might see them in and around any kind of faculty association events or meetings. So we welcome Alex and Christy as our 2 new members at large. And actually, we haven't had a member at large for quite some time, so it's really exciting to be able to fill those roles. Here's a bargaining update for you. So an update that I received from Phil Flagel on bargaining right now as it stands. He says, in terms of a negotiation update, we are in a holding pattern at the moment. We have finished up our prep as the Faculty Association and prepared our bargaining proposals. We were given a list of bargaining protocols, which is rules for negotiating, from the other side, and while we thought most were okay, we made a few counter proposals to the rules, which we sent back to the college. We are waiting for their response. Once the bargaining protocols have been agreed upon, we will move into the exchange of proposals, and bargaining will commence. This process will likely commence sometime in May and or June, with a pause in July and August should no agreement be made. A reminder that the current collective agreement is in effect until a new collective agreement is agreed upon and ratified by both sides. So that's what's happening in bargaining right now. It's kind of just beginning that process. Do watch for communications on bargaining as we continue into the process of the proposals and bargaining itself. Here's a clip from the PAC, what's going on for professional affairs. Here's a clip from Lindsay Bonifant about what PAC is up to right now.
This is Lindsay Bonifant, the VP of the Professional Affairs Committee. I want to thank everyone who joined us in April for Lindsay Fiebig's Wise and Well session on fostering a sense of wellness during a pandemic. Her sway presentation and recording are now up on the BVCFA website. Coming up in May, Marjorie Contenti will be presenting on meditation for health and joyful living. More information to come on that. For our last Wise and Well session of the year in June, Crystal Manyfingers will be presenting on health and wellness from an Indigenous perspective, which also happens to be National Indigenous Peoples Day on June 21st. The PAC committee will be working closely with our VP of Communications to put together a repository of stories, articles, quotes, and other tidbits that aim to inspire and re-energize faculty surrounding teaching and learning. These will be shared in various ways in our future communications. Thank you.
All right, and that is what's up in the FA right now. Of course, there's always a lot of things going on behind the scenes. If you ever have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to your faculty association. That leads us into segment number 2. That is our news and notes. This is a good one today. I've got some news. I've got a special guest coming on to tell us some important things about this news from their particular perspective. And of course, I'm going to give you my notes on the subject, and we'll talk about my opinions, which of course really matter. All right, the news is BVC talks cuts. This is not new news. We know this already, and it's been the case for the past couple of Alberta budget years. It was communicated earlier a few months back that we were looking at a negative 1.1%. So it's not a giant cut, and we're really, really hoping that that's not going to result in any job losses or anything like that in terms of what college itself can absorb. So it was kind of bad news, but not the worst news we could have received. Now, there is an additional 5% of our funding that is contingent on us meeting a new metric. All right. So now 5% of our total funding is going to come from us meeting a set of criteria laid out by the Alberta government, which we don't actually have all the criteria yet. And each particular school in Alberta has been given one specific metric to meet in an effort to kind of scale back this large scale shift from funding methods for PSIs. So, okay, good news, bad news, but we know that 5% of our funding is contingent on us meeting this. And so the metric Bow Valley College was given is called work integrated learning. I'm sure you've heard this phrase thrown around, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. We do this already at BVC in a lot of our programs. So I think this is something that we're actually going to be quite successful at. And I have a lot of faith in our faculty members to make sure that they're doing their best. We do have a special guest on today to help us explore the topic of this new funding metric from government, our specific work integrated funding metric. And so we're going to hear that interview right now. Joining me today is Mr. David Eggen, MLA for the Alberta Legislature. Welcome to the BVCFA podcast, Mr. Eggen.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm the official opposition critic for advanced education with the Alberta New Democrats.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest reasons why we wanted to get your perspective today, because there's so much going on in advanced education right now, and one of the many big things that we're struggling with in post-secondaries is the imposition of this new funding metric. And that's, raised a lot of concerns. And so I'm coming from a perspective of faculty, and I'm, curious how this is going to affect our bottom line and jobs. Of course, we don't want to see any more cuts than we've already seen. And how is this going to affect our learners, and what's this going to do to an already overloaded faculty in terms of workload and stuff like that. So we really appreciate your perspective on this today.
Well, sure. And, I was surprised that the UCP government was still moving forward on this proposal, right? These performance-based funding in general,
Hmm.
and then workplace metrics for Bow Valley College specifically. Because, whenever you are introducing a new program, you need to support that program and you need to support it with funds. And so I think we should all be very suspicious that, they are embarking on quite a ambitious new project and cutting funding at the same time. So, I mean, those two things just don't add up. They're not logical. And whatever benefits we can have from, a workplace integration and, more apprenticeships or what have you in the field, I mean, that's all well and good. But if you're not supporting that, or even worse, you are having that in a combination with quite serious cuts, some of the biggest cuts we've seen to post-secondary in more than a generation, then
Hmm.
I think we all have to be very suspicious.
Yeah. And I think we're feeling that on a frontline level. And really just kind of, we've seen so many people lose their positions. I mean, we've seen the loss of programs. We've seen low enrollment because of COVID. And, we've really been hit hard we've been online fully for 14 months. Like,
Yeah.
there's so much challenge. And I appreciate the idea that if you're going to do something like this and change your whole way of setting up funding for an entire post-secondary program, that there should be supports in place for that. What supports would you suggest that the government needs to put in place to make sure that this is successful?
Well, I think that first of all, they need to back off these cuts. We've had three UCP budgets now that have taken, more than $690 million out of post-secondary in general from the last budget that we put forward for post-secondary when we were the government. I mean, so that's a lot of money that they've taken out, and they really need to stop that. I mean, as you said very correctly, many of our colleges like Bow Valley have been online for more than a year.
Yeah.
And we need, as part of our economic recovery and just a community recovery, to have our post-secondary institutions functioning and strong, right? We have
Yeah.
26 universities, colleges, and polytechnics across the province. I would say that that's perhaps the single best asset we have to engage in economic recovery, not just from COVID, but with an unstable energy market too. And, to undercut those institutions right now, it's unconscionable, quite frankly, right? We know
Hmm.
what we need. We need to diversify the economy. We need to retrain people. We need to give people a sense of hope.
Yeah.
And cutting funding for Bow Valley College is exactly the wrong thing to do.
I think I can probably echo those sentiments as well. If you don't mind, I'll just read out the statement that I got from the Minister for Advanced Education, Minister Nicolaides, and he wasn't able to join on the podcast today, but he did have his press secretary send me a statement. So this is what he said: increasing the connection between education and employment is an important goal for Alberta advanced education. According to the 2019 Graduates Outcomes Survey, 90% of first-year students said that preparing for a specific job or career was an important or very important reason behind their decision to go to post-secondary. Through initiatives like encouraging work-integrated learning with institution-specific metrics, we can help ensure that Alberta's graduates are getting what they want out of their post-secondary education. The metric of work-integrated learning will encourage post-secondary institutions to explore new and innovative ways to prepare students for careers after completing their education. It could entail creating more direct work-integrated learning opportunities for students, or creating more partnerships with the private sector that demonstrate direct post-graduation career paths. This metric will increase the connections between education and employment and help set our students up for long-term success. Do you have any response to that? Do you agree with the idea of long-term success for students here?
Oh, of course. I mean, these things are self-evident. And of course, one of the reasons that people will go to college, university, Bow Valley College, is, to increase their fortunes for a job afterwards. I mean, that is self-evident. But what also must be self-evident is that if you are engaging in, a ambitious program for new partnerships and so forth with the wider community, then you must make sure you are supporting that, right? It's not just something you wrote down on a piece of paper. It has to be financially supported as well. I know when I was the Minister of K-12 Education that we looked for partnerships and with high school kids and then into the community as well. It was very successful, but it's not cheap either. And you can't expect that businesses will engage in partnerships for nothing, right? And what I'm very concerned about, and the UCP government must not go down this path, is that putting students into the field without being supported, right? And if they're internships, then they should be being compensated for that as well, right? This whole idea that we set up apprenticeship programs and students are not compensated for that, right? They're working for free in the fields, in the industry. That is the wrong way to go, right? We know that is, I'm suspicious of that with this new legislation they just introduced last week, and I will be pursuing that in a constructively critical way, of course, in the legislature, over these next 3 weeks.
Okay. I mean, that's it's good to hear that we've got someone who's kind of going to bat here. In terms of like getting people into industry. So something came up in a conversation that I had with a colleague, and at Bow Valley College, we have many different kinds of programs, but one of the very important programs and one of the drivers of enrollment to our college is things in health and human services. So, we do our practical nurse program, we have healthcare aides, we have all sorts of other kinds of health and human services programs being offered. And one of the things that was brought up was how do we expect in the middle of a pandemic to get people in the health and human services industries to take on apprenticeships and add to their workload in a pandemic, which I thought was a really interesting point. How do you think that this will affect industries when we have to push so hard for this work integrated learning?
Well, the part that I'm most suspicious about, not the apprenticeship part. I mean, that's an organic and I think fruitful way to help educate students, quite frankly, right? But, this notion that you, let's say, tie funding to how students are getting those connections into the community is completely backwards, right? This performance-based funding metric, saying, well, if you produce this many positions into apprenticeships and then with graduating with jobs, then that's how you will be evaluated as a program. And, when you build something like that has a negative element to it, right? It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Where let's say you have a program, because I know let's say Bow Valley, you have health care programs and so forth. And you also have tied into that literacy and so forth, right? Programs, because these are lots of new Canadians and so forth, right? And so, you can't measure the foundational knowledge that someone needs to enter into a work-related program with jobs, right? And of course, some programs will produce less jobs and less apprenticeships, and then you cut money for them. Then it's like, as they say, a self-fulfilling prophecy where they are not successful at that, and then you take their money away, and then they'll be really not successful at that. You know what I mean? Like it just becomes self-evident. It's just another way to cut, and that's dishonest.
Yeah, and it creates that snowball effect of just continuing on that, as you said, self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yep.
I mean, I don't have any other specific questions for you. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add in terms of how this whole funding metric is going to affect post-secondaries in Alberta, and what we might see coming down the pipe in the future?
Yeah, no, thank you. And I mean, I think that we need to be alert, and we need to make sure we mobilize both faculty and students, around the value of post-secondary, and not, take these cuts lying down, right? If I can offer some hope to the future, is that, this UCP government is not very successful. I've seen a number of conservative governments since I've been an elected official. And, this UCP government is stumbling big time, right? And, for them to come after and attack post-secondary at this point, they're not in a good position to do so, right? So they made these promises to move ahead with performance-based funding and so forth. But, they're just another way to cut, right? Like I say, if you're introducing new programs and you're not offering any money, you're taking money away, then it's just part of the cutting program, right? And the rest of it's all just words and so forth, right? However, as I say, because the government, has already undermined post-secondary so much and has so many other problems in their government that they might put it on paper, but hopefully they will be wise enough not to execute it with the way that they want it to, right? So if we are strong, right, you have friends with us in the official opposition to fight hard, and together with your faculty and student groups, we can push back, right? We were successful at delaying this performance metric last year. And guess what? Everything's on a 4-year cycle. And we're now inside 20 some months before the next election. And, that's the wonderful thing about democracy is that, we don't have to put up with the same thing all the time. Our party demonstrated that we don't just have conservative governments. If they fail, if the government's conservatives are not doing the job, Albertans will vote them out, right? Simple as that. So that's what we're here for as well, to offer hope for the future. And always myself and Rachel Notley and the rest of the Alberta New Democrats are at your service.
We really appreciate you spending some time talking with us today and the insights that you bring from your wonderful long career in as a member of the Legislative Assembly. And so thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Eggen.
No worries. I can't wait to get down there in person again, and we can talk.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be a great day when we can see each other face to face again.
Thank you.
Well, of course, it's nothing but interesting hearing perspectives from two sides of government. So hopefully you got something out of that discussion with Mr. Eggen today. Last up on our news and notes segment here is the Alberta government wants campuses to open in September. All right. So Minister Dimitrios Nicolaides has stated that we should be looking at fully opening our doors in September for face-to-face learning. What does this mean for Bow Valley College? There's no answer to this one. We've been told that our safety and our learners' safety is most important. We do have a reentry committee that is still working on a plan. So I guess deans and schools are going to have the final say on how it actually looks when we end up going back to campus. Some schools may go back earlier than other schools. Some schools may go back more fully than other schools. We may see some movement between the schools. Can we expect to all be on campus in September? Well, I guess the answer is we don't really know. That's the problem here. With announcements like this from the government, that's the problem with COVID-19, the pandemic in general. All of our plans are a moving target. So we don't actually have any definitive answers except that our safety is the primary concern. So we can say that the college executive has said that our safety is the primary concern in re-entry. So you know what? We'll see how it goes. A lot of that could be contingent on the use of modern classrooms and how many modern classrooms are up and running, because we know that that's coming, and we do have several faculty members testing out the modern classroom just to see how that technology works and give us some feedback on how we can utilize these new classrooms. So we do expect at some point to have 50 modern classrooms in play in the very near future. That's what they say. So I don't know, maybe modern classrooms are kind of related to return to campus in some way. Something interesting that's just happened is that U of A just recently announced that they're going to return to 80% capacity in the fall, face-to-face. And as always, we're very curious how this is going to play out for other PSIs. So it'll be interesting to watch. So keep your eyes peeled for news about returning to campus. We know that we're going to be having some flexible work models and things like that coming up. And I'm sure you're going to have some meetings and hear from your deans and associate deans at the very beginning of the term just about what each of our schools is going to do with this flexible work schedule and model and how that's all going to kind of shake out. Interested to hear what's going to happen there. As a faculty association, I mean, we can't really give our go ahead or thumbs up on any specific type of policy, because then when it comes to bargaining, we don't really have a leg to stand on. So while the faculty association doesn't necessarily endorse this flexible work policy, it is something that we're going to have to live with. And so it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out as we go forward. So that's the news. Here's the notes. What it all boils down to is that things just remain uncertain. We've been in limbo and we've been in flux for over a year now. I guess we know when we know. And that's the frustrating thing. We've had to just endure so many changes day by day by day by day. And we still just have to kind of keep our eyes and our ears opening. This new funding metric is going to present some interesting and significant challenges for our post-secondary institutions as a whole. But I think as Bow Valley, this is my opinion, Bow Valley College is in a really cool position because of the nature of our teaching and learning. I think we're probably in a position where we'll be pretty good at work integrated learning. We already do that, right? There's so many programs that already do that. And there's some really innovative and creative ways that we can start implementing that, as we are going to hear in our next segment from the faculty. Well, that's a perfect segue into the next segment. So here is segment number 3 from the faculty. For this segment, we're going to hear from 2 amazing faculty members, Christy and Lynn. All right, Christy's going to give us a peek into the life of an instructor doing work integrated learning in their program. That's a really interesting conversation. You're going to want to stay tuned. Lynn is going to tell us all about an amazing achievement and opportunity she created for herself that is absolutely worth celebrating. First up is Christy Pettypa, and she's going to give us some insight and information about this new work integrated learning and how it affects us at Bow Valley. PSIs all over Alberta are sitting in this new situation where a chunk of our funding is really contingent on us meeting this metric. So here she is with more to say about that.
Good day, Christy.
Hi, Tara.
I'm not going to say good morning or good afternoon because whenever someone's listening to this, it's going to be a different time of day. So I've invited Christy onto the podcast today because she's got some really awesome experience at Bow Valley College working with our work integrated learning, so that we're already doing. So Christy, I'm just wondering if you could just kind of tell everybody, what area you work in and maybe outline some of your experiences that you've had so far with the work integrated learning piece.
Sure. So I teach in the Health and Human Service Management post-diploma program, which is a bit of a mouthful. So it's a 1-year certificate, and it was designed for people who had a background in health or human services and were looking to kind of advance their skills for promotion or more leadership positions in their organization. And so it's a 1-year program. So when we started doing work integrated learning, it was a bit of a challenge in that students are really only with us for 2 semesters. It's not a long program. And so how do you put work integrated learning into such a short program? The other challenge with our program was that of the 10 courses they take, 6 are options. So what courses do you put the work integrated learning in to ensure that everyone is exposed to it or at least has an opportunity to participate in it? So whereas other kind of diplomas that are 2 years have an opportunity to put practicums or capstone projects, we were really kind of challenged with how to even get work integrated learning into our program in the first place. So this is the first semester that we've kind of taken a shot at it. There's been some really good stuff and there's been some really challenging stuff. So I worked in 2 classes on work integrated learning projects. The first is in a course I teach that's around teaching health and human service professionals, or it's basically workshop and facilitation development. And so we developed some training for an organization called the Developmental Disability Resource Center in Calgary. And they were looking for some help with their orientation for their community resource workers who work frontline with people with disabilities. So we did a project with them. And then the second project was really cool. It was in a research class I teach, and we worked with the Brenda Stratford Center, which is a second stage domestic violence shelter. And they just got a facility dog named Swell. And so they were looking for some research around how to integrate Swell into the different programs they have. So how to use him in therapy, but also how to use him in their child development center, and just kind of how to best integrate him into their programming. So that was a really cool project too.
Oh, that actually sounds so innovative and interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So you've only been doing this for one semester. So like where do you see these kinds of projects moving forward, and how faculty is going to have to work to try and integrate these things?
So I think like one of the cool parts about it is that both of these opportunities came about really organically. And we just kind of put a call out to the community, and the organizations themselves had a lot of different ideas about things that students could potentially be helping out with. In terms of kind of how to, for faculty, one of the ways or one of the challenges is to try and have the project or the opportunity as far in advance as possible, because it's not something that you can kind of just jump into, because it does take a lot of preparation in terms of you are altering assignments, you are altering lesson plans because the expectations are different now. And so having it kind of as much planned out in advance as possible, I think is an asset to faculty, because it is something that's difficult to kind of do on the fly. It is a lot of work to be trying to figure out how this is going to fit into an existing course, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean that makes sense. And I guess coming from the faculty position, that probably does affect the workload. Do you have any comments on how that affected your workload?
For sure, yeah. So I think the biggest piece was making adjustments in a relatively short period of time. I didn't have a lot of opportunity to prep in advance. So a bit of it was adjusting assignments, figuring out where pieces were going to fit in the existing course. That was definitely challenging. And then also just figuring out like how often as a faculty should you be communicating with the different organizations? Where do you want to bring them in? What does that look like? How do you want to set that up? How do you want students to be communicating with the organization and that as well? So kind of figuring out like those guidelines or those parameters takes a bit of work too. And so, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And so you do it. And there's definitely and certainly things I would do different next time. I'm sure that each iteration will get a bit better, but that's a bit of a challenge too, in that the opportunity is always going to look different. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do this project with Brenda Stratford Center. Next semester, it's going to be something completely different. Might be in a different class. So it's something that's always kind of evolving. And as faculty, we're kind of constantly adapting to it. And of course, that adds to workload as well.
Yeah, definitely. And so I guess that begs the question, if we're talking about work integrated learning as this like metric that we have to meet some criteria for to receive funding, which is, I mean, pretty important. I'm curious if you have any thoughts or insight on how faculty can be supported in this, like, because from what it sounds like is you were just kind of like, okay, go find some opportunities. And I feel like that's kind of like a shot in the dark almost. And adding to the what if I can't find an opportunity for these students, is there anything in place at Bow Valley that you know of or that you've experienced to kind of like support you in that role in terms of like, I don't know, your ADs or your program chairs or anything like that?
Yeah, so there's kind of multiple channels, and I think that they're evolving kind of as we speak. So absolutely, I think one of the first things that we have that's an asset is our program advisory committees. So we do have members from the community who are on those committees, and we do have pre-existing relationships in the community, which is great. So you're kind of able to build on those relationships, which is great. And I think the associate deans and program chairs have been really, really helpful and supportive in that. The college has also brought in a software called Ripen, which is, I've heard the kind of analogy that it's almost like a dating site between post-secondaries and organizations and different companies. So both post-secondaries and organizations can kind of advertise different opportunities and connect that way. So you can find opportunities that way. And we did try to utilize Ripen. Some of the challenges with that platform are it's using Canada and the US. So some of the opportunities are American, some are in Toronto. So if you're looking for something local, there's no kind of guarantee that you're going to be able to find something more local. The other challenge for us was the majority of students that graduate from our program work in nonprofit, and that's really kind of our where we are or where we're situated. And you do have to pay to be on this platform. So most of the organizations or companies that are on there are great for business or tech. Like you can kind of see how it's a great fit there. Not a lot of nonprofits. There were a few. And I know like we found out that nonprofit, like if we made a connection, they can join the Ripen platform for free, but it's a little bit like they own for 3 trials or something. I don't have the exact details of that, but that was definitely a challenge with that platform is there wasn't a lot of good fits for the stuff that we were able to have our students work on.
Right. Yeah, that does sound like a bit of a challenge, especially in the health and human services area, right?
Yeah.
So going forward, I mean, I think we're going to have to start seeing, okay, well, let's rewind a little bit. I think Bow Valley as an access college already does a lot of work integrated learning, because that's just where our students are and we're trying to get them working and getting them into industry and things like that. But not all programs have something like this. If you have any advice or anything that you might be able to foresee of, new like schools trying this out for the first time and, as someone who's had to mitigate a lot of different challenges in the last couple of semesters here, like, is there any insight that you have there?
I think just the ability to be creative and adaptable in terms of how we think about work integrated learning. So traditionally it's been a co-op, it's been a practicum. It's kind of this dedicated course almost that is dedicated to being in the workplace. And so for a lot of programs, that's not really possible or it doesn't fit with the current kind of format or structure of that program. So I think thinking about work integrated learning in that maybe it's just one assignment in your class. It's not that the whole class is dedicated to strictly work integrated learning, but you have kind of different assignments or projects peppered kind of throughout the program instead of just this one kind of dedicated, this is like we are doing work integrated learning in this class. And I think being able to be creative and kind of adaptable in that way opens up a lot more doors for both the employers who maybe don't want to take on a full-time practicum student, but want to work with a class on a project. And also in terms of just the program being able to meet that requirement. So I think definitely the biggest piece, I think, is just being able to be creative and adaptable in how we think about it. And I know we're still kind of defining, like, and the government, I think, is still defining what they mean by work integrated learning. And that will be helpful too, because I think right now it's like, well, okay, I get it. It's work integrated learning, but like, what's the criteria or what are the parameters of what would meet that requirement?
Yeah, that's always the tricky piece, right? Because I think we're kind of, still in such a limbo place, not knowing exactly the parameters. But I think too, I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things where I wonder if we can define our own criteria. Like, if we can say, this is what we do, hey, government, and this is how we're getting learners into industry and connecting them with community, I wonder, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, right? Like, I wonder if that's something that we can actually have a hand in.
Absolutely. And so it'll be interesting to kind of see how this evolves over the next little while, because we know that is the one metric that we're going to be measured on. But yeah, how we adapt, like how we define it between kind of the institution and the government, I think is going to play a big role in kind of how it rolls out and how it evolves for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, that's a lot of food for thought here. So a couple of takeaways I have are, be flexible, be adaptable. You got to be innovative and creative. And, I think as going forward, we'll probably have to have more specific guidelines and parameters and supports for faculty to make sure that we're not overdoing ourselves on the workload and, making sure that work balance is still there, because I know that that's always a big thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Christy, for joining us today. And I know your colleagues are going to probably get a lot out of our conversation. So much appreciated for having you join us on the podcast today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dara.
Last but not least is a great guest, and you've been waiting for this the whole hour long. I've been looking forward to this part. You've been looking forward to this part, and I promise you, you're going to walk away from Lynn Wynn's story absolutely inspired. Here's my chat with Lynn Wynn.
Joining me today is Lynn Wynn, and she is a faculty member in the School of Global Access. Welcome, Lynn.
Hello.
So today we're going to just, I think, celebrate some accomplishments that Lynn has achieved. I didn't know this, but Lynn has done a ton of things in her life that are pretty noteworthy. Am I correct? I mean, one or two.
Yeah.
So the thing that I'd love to highlight today, Lynn, is the fact that you received a grant to write a book. So, I mean, can you shed some light on what's the book about? What's the grant? Where did this come from?
Oh, geez, where do we start? Yeah, so I had this amazing news last month. It was through the Alberta Foundation for the Arts, and it's a literary grant of $15,000. And it's just to help cover some of my bills while I finish this piece of writing that I've been working on. And I also received a grant last fall from the Canada Council for the Arts. So that was about $25,000. And for me, it's more, I mean, the money obviously is so helpful in this time, and I'm working casually at the moment. What's more impactful in my life right now is just this idea that a group of, a committee sitting somewhere read my proposal and decided that it was a writing project that was worth funding, and how hard it is to kind of get these, get funded for the arts. So I'm just super grateful and super excited to carry out this writing project.
Yeah, so not one, but two people have looked at your proposal and said, yeah, that's a book I want to read, right?
I want to read. I'm like, okay, so in the hard, there's such a emotional roller coaster of like self-doubt and exhilaration, and wondering if looking at your own life and wondering if it's a story worth telling even, and to be affirmed in that way is so powerful.
Definitely. So from our chat, you told me it was kind of writing the same topic that you did a TED Talk on in 2016, TEDx Canmore. So can you, maybe elaborate on some of the topics and details in this book? I love the TED Talk, by the way. Everybody should listen to it.
I don't even know where to begin, though.
Is it about the ultra marathons? Is it about this perseverance? And
yeah, it's a memoir, and it's capturing basically all the highlights of my life. The themes that run throughout are just about endurance and perseverance and gratitude, and my family. I was born in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, and we came over as part of the boat people. Right. And when the world was, in chaos, and to be accepted by Canada was, I feel like, my first lucky thing. And yeah, luck has is also a prevalent theme. And then so I grew up in the prairies and had this really comfortable life and comfortable childhood, and it was later on as an adult where I wanted to challenge myself with these adventures. And in 2011, I won a writing contest through CBC. And I used the money to run a marathon in Antarctica.
Right.
And then after that, I came back from that race and ended up winning another contest through Kellogg's, and ended up running a marathon at the North Pole, and became the first Canadian woman to run a marathon at both poles. And it was kind of like through that process where I was speaking to someone and they said like, well, now that you've conquered the cold, have you thought of conquering the heat? And so I decided to run this series called The Four Deserts, and it's 250 kilometers of self-supported racing through these 4 deserts of the world. And throughout it all, like managing to win these contests to help pay for these races, because these races are exorbitant. Like like I think Antarctica was about 16,000, North Pole the same.
Wow.
The deserts, and Bow Valley employs me well. It's a good living. However, it's not enough that you could drop $16,000 on a race. So
in a bunch of marathon,
So like the memoir is about, going through all these challenges, but more that just the incredible string of luck of my life, of like surviving a war, of surviving a year at the refugee camp, of being accepted into Canada. One of my favorite stories is that while we were at the refugee camp, there was the opportunity to go to East Germany.
Oh, wow.
And my dad knew a little bit about geography. He's like, we're not going to East Germany.
That's on the other side of the wall.
Yeah, just like, I don't know that that's a step up, so we he held out, thank God, because I could have lived behind the Iron Curtain for most of my life. And so it's about luck and endurance and perseverance and living in that state of gratitude. And so when the pandemic happened and my employment status was changed, and I was, like I mentioned, I was working casually, and at that exact moment to be gifted this writing grant by the Canada Council was just the most extraordinary thing that could have happened. And I felt that my runway was extended, and as I said a few minutes ago, like just having that, knowing that someone read my proposal and felt that it was a project that was worth funding, and then receiving this grant. So it's been, as everyone else, like it's been a really hard year, but it's been a really amazing year as well. Yeah.
Well, that theme of luck, and and we mentioned, like, I tend to think that we often like make our own luck based on what we're putting out into the world, and we get these things back. And I'm sure you weren't just sitting on your sofa one day and someone called you up and said, can we fund you to run in Antarctica? So, I mean, obviously you're pursuing these things in such a way that like someone's noticing you. So, like, I'm just curious, you seem to win a lot of contests. I mean, what advice could you give about that?
My advice is if you see an opportunity to actually, throw your hat in the ring, so to speak. Like, I think a lot of people just look at these things, and it was literally an online campaign through CBC, and they said, write us what your dream adventure would be, and the prize is $10,000. And I think someone might actually look at that and think, well, I'm not going to win that.
Yeah.
Whereas the first time that happened, I was like, well, there's no entry fee. Like, they're not, there's no fee to register your entry. And it was just time and effort. And I thought, someone's got to win that. And why shouldn't it be me?
It's a great thing to think, though, like, because you're exactly right. A lot of people just wouldn't even bother. It's like, what are the chances?
Yeah, and I think we see those little things all the time, and every time I see a kind of contest, I think, but there has to be a winner.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like the confidence that winning the CBC one gave me, I just took that confidence into everything else that I did afterwards. Like, and it was a contest through Kellogg's, and then I was sponsored through Duct Tape and Mark's Work Warehouse, and like it was all these kind of the most improbable places that you would look for funding as an ultra runner. And then and then the ultimate funding of all, which was the grant to write the book. And I really feel like, I really hope that its contents will really inspire people to just look at life a little bit differently and just understand that there's so much magic that we have access to. And I just have it in my bones now. Like, I think because I've won so many of these things, like that, like my Canada Council application and my Alberta Foundation for the Arts application, it was like my first time out. And I know writers who have been pursuing these grants for years, and they try every year and and they said, don't worry if you don't get it your first time, because we've been trying for a few years, and I got both of them my first time out.
Okay, so I feel like the universe is telling you something, right?
And my guiding philosophy is, I say this in my TED Talk, but that the universe does conspire to help the dreamer, and that we were not born to live mundane lives. Like, we were born to be extraordinary. And as soon as you decide that in your head, and as soon as you put yourself on that path to becoming who you're supposed to be, like, there'll be all these things that come into your life to help you get there. And it's just extraordinary to me that this continues to happen. And also this idea that luck is finite, like when we say, like, don't push your luck.
Yeah.
But that's a chapter that I write about in my book, because my friends actually call me Luck Pusher. Like, that's my nickname.
Yeah.
And I actually don't believe that it is. It's, to say don't push your luck, and to assume that the status quo is good enough right now, like, and to not press it, to be happy where you are. I just think it's not an expansive, like, infinite place to live. Like, I view it the opposite. I think luck is self-perpetuating. And there was a golfer, I think Arnold Palmer, said, he was being interviewed, and he's like, he hit a hole in one or something. He's like, wow, you're incredible. And one of the interviewers said, wow, you're so lucky today. He's like, yeah, it's crazy, but the more I practice, the luckier I get.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I do think it's like a muscle. And I mean, to say that luck is finite is saying that love is finite. Like, like, if we believe that we are creatures of a more powerful force, like, I just never felt that I was born to live an ordinary life. And my father, for me, captured it best when I was young, and we had arrived safely in Canada. And his words to me set me on the road to believing that I could be and do anything I wanted. But he said, just remember that by the age of 5, that you had already done the hardest thing you would ever do in life.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was surviving the refugee camp. So imagine that, it's kind of like brush yourself off and be like, wow, that's it. Like, everything, wait a minute, everything from here on in will be easier than that. Like,
moving up. It's amazing.
So that is the philosophy that I carry with me. Like, and that's not to say that it wasn't hard. Like, 42 kilometers in the North Pole, minus 33, like, that was hard.
Oh gosh, yeah.
But it wasn't impossible.
Yeah.
And it was, yeah.
But it wasn't impossible, because there's so many things that we do that are hard.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
So,
I don't think we can.
Yeah. So it's just, it's definitely like a really, like, beautiful cosmic kind of force that has pulled me through this incredibly fortunate, incredibly amazing life. And
Great.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to read your book.
Yeah, I'm so
excited
about it too. Yeah, I really feel that it has the potential to reach a larger audience. And but most importantly, like, I think if people saw me, let's just say that my doctor has been pushing me for years to lose weight. Yeah, meaning, like, I am not that lean ultra run. Like, people don't look at me and think she's an ultra runner. Like, like, Like
Yeah.
people look at me like, wow, she really loves food.
I think a lot of us fit that category. That's just normal.
Right now, yeah. But yeah, I think having spoken at different conferences and sharing my story, like that's the part that people love, is that I'm actually a garbage runner. Like I come last in every race, and it's being able to check your humility, like,
Yeah.
and yeah, one of the phrases I always use is like, I'm last but not least.
Yeah.
And I was tired of reading books like this. One of the lines in my book is, if you have picked up this book hoping to get running tips that'll like improve your running performance, put the book down. Like, walk away.
That's not what this is about.
This will not make you, I was like, yeah, in one of the chapters, this will not make you a better runner, save your money. Like, because that's not what the heart of the story is. The heart of the story is just being fearless and hopeful and pursuing whatever greater purpose we were meant to.
I love that, being able to pursue a purpose. I mean, I don't know if you're thinking this far ahead, but what's next for you? Are you gonna do more marathons, write another book? Where do you see yourself?
So I have a few friends who have Guinness World Records.
Oh.
So I have Guinness World Record envy.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay.
I know. So I sit on my couch and I'm like, but I want a Guinness World Record. Like, how does one get it? So I'm planning some things, but there is something that I'm hoping to attempt later on in the year that will earn me a Guinness record.
That's so cool. So now we're all going to be waiting with bated breath to figure out what the heck you're going to try and do to get a record. That's amazing. And you know what? You're such a winner that I'm sure.
It's a reasonable record. The current record right now is let's just say it's very reasonable. So I'm getting ready for that. And the other clue I'll leave is that it's not even running related. It has nothing to do with running. Okay.
So everybody listening is okay. And if they know you, they're thinking, what would Lynn get up to? Oh, that's so amazing. Well, I want to just thank you so much for sharing of yourself for your faculty colleagues today. And I cannot wait to read your book. Any thoughts on when we might see that on the shelves?
Oh, it's really slow going. So I just submitted my first draft. I'm hoping to get my final draft by August, and even then, it's a year out from that. So it's but
maybe sometime late 2022, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, everybody needs to watch out for Lynn Nguyen and her book. Do you have a title for the book?
I do, and I will gladly share it because I actually own the URL.
Okay.
So nobody can take it. It's called However the Fire Burns.
However the Fire Burns. Awesome. Amazing. Okay. Well, let's watch out for However the Fire Burns by Lynn Nguyen sometime next year, we're hoping. And let's see if she can break some kind of Guinness World Record. Thank you so much for joining us on our very first podcast, Lynn.
Oh, you're so welcome. That was fun.
Yeah, totally.
I hope that you took something away from that experience. I am so inspired and encouraged by Lynn's story and her perspective. And I hope we can all just kind of come together and remember that life is all about taking chances. And, we're never going to be able to have things if we don't try for them, right? We're never going to be able to win if we don't try and join the race. And so having a look at Lynn's perspective and the way she views life is just a beautiful thing and really, really inspiring and encouraging. So here are my final thoughts today. There's so much going on in the world today. I hope today's episode gave you some needed information, some things to think about, and hopefully a little bit of levity in a tough world. It is so easy to get caught up in the negative, the difficult, the scary. So if I can leave you with one thought, let it be this. Here's a quote from Norman Vincent Peale in The Power of Positive Thinking. Stand up to an obstacle. Just stand up to it, that's all. And don't give way under it. And it will finally break. You will break it. Something has to break, and it won't be you. It will be the obstacle. So to sum up today's thoughts, folks, you've got this. We've got this. And you're doing great, even if you don't really feel like it. Just give yourself a pat on the back, because the last 14 months have been a ride. And you know what? It's going to continue to do so. You're so innovative. You're so amazing. You're so creative. Pat yourself on the back for a job well done. And of course, tune in next time for more You're on Mute, the BVCFA podcast with yours truly. Have a great day.